Question 1135. A primary residence is a person's A. largest home, B. first home, C. main residence, D. newest home. Correct answer is C. main residence. A person's primary residence, or main residence, is the dwelling where they usually live, typically a house or an apartment. A person can only have one primary residence at any given time, though they may share the residence with other people. Question 1136. What is the minimum age that a married person can lawfully make a contract? A. 18. B. 21. C. 25. D. There is no minimum age. Correct answer is D. There is no minimum age. There is no age requirement for entering into a contract for anyone legally married. Question 1137. A 17-year-old, who has joined the U.S. Marines, wants to sign a rental lease. He may, A. not enter into a rental agreement, B. legally enter into a rental agreement, C. enter into a rental agreement if his parents or guardian give their written approval, D. enter into a conditional contract which becomes binding when he turns 18. Correct answer is B. legally enter into a rental agreement. Someone under 18 years old who serves in the U.S. military is considered an emancipated minor and can legally sign a binding contract to purchase, rent or lease property. Question 1138. Broker Betty included the following in the listing contract she presented to client Carl. As consideration for the following, Broker Betty agrees to use her best efforts in procuring a buyer for the listed property. This clause is A. necessary to establish a bilateral contract, B. necessary to establish a unilateral contract, C. unnecessary, D. required by the doctrine of laches. Correct answer is A. necessary to establish a bilateral contract. The elements of a bilateral contract include a promise provided in exchange for another promise. The broker is extending a promise of performance to the seller. Question 1139. It is required that a recorded lease be acknowledged by A. county clerk, B. lessee, C. lessor, D. building superintendent. Correct answer is C. lessor. Leases with a term of 1 year or more must be in the form of a signed writing. Question 1140. A tenancy in common is created when A. more than one person takes title, B. the parties are not married to each other, C. there is no other way to take title, D. all of the above. Correct answer is D. all of the above. Tenants in common may take title at different times, on separate deeds, have unequal shares and/or have equal rights of possession. Question 1141. Public buildings like churches and libraries are generally appraised using which method? A. cost approach, B. sales comparison approach, C. income approach, D. market approach. Correct answer is a cost approach. The cost approach considers just what the land, without structures, would cost, adds the cost of actual construction, then deducts depreciation. The cost approach is most often used for public buildings, because of the usual lack of recently sold comparable properties in the local market. Public buildings earn no income, so the income approach cannot be used either. Question 1142. An interested buyer makes an offer to a broker of $900,000 on a property that is listed for $1 million. The seller responds with a counteroffer of $950,000 communicated by the broker to the prospective buyer, who makes no response. A week later, the seller instructs the listing broker that he is accepting the buyer's first offer of $900,000. At this point, the parties have A. no agreement, B. a valid agreement, C. an agreement that can be modified as to the asking price by the buyer, D. a conditional agreement with a fee simple defeasible. Correct answer is a no agreement. The original offer was terminated when the seller submitted a counteroffer. No contract will be formed between the parties unless and until the potential buyer accepts the counteroffer. Question 1143. What is a tender? A. an unconditional offer of performance of one party's contractual obligations, B. an offer of money from one broker in order to obtain a listing from an owner, C. A request by one party to shorten the escrow period and complete the transaction. D. None of the above. Correct answer is A. An unconditional offer of performance of one party's contractual obligations. A tender of performance constitutes an offer by a party to perform their duties under a contract. A tender is often made when it appears the other party is not going to complete their contracted for performance. Question 1144. A promise made by a third person to a creditor that the third person will be responsible for a creditor's debt is called A. Third-party promise, B. Contract of suretyship, C. Vicarious liability, D. Debtor-to-creditor transference. Correct answer is B. Contract of suretyship. According to the Statute of Frauds, a contract of suretyship must be in writing, unless A. The third party makes the promise to pay to the debtor instead of the creditor. B. The third party promises to be primarily responsible for the debt. Or, C. The third party's main purpose for making the promise is for his own benefit, called the main purpose rule. Question 1145. The performance of a contractual duty, as compelled by a court in cases where damages would not be an adequate remedy, is called A. Equitable action, B. Recapture clause, C. Escrow payment, D. Specific performance. Correct answer is D. Specific performance. Specific performance is the legal action through which the breaching party is forced to fulfill the terms of the contract. Question 1146. During the escrow period, a buyer and seller have a dispute and their property transaction fails to close. Both parties demand the earnest money from the broker acting as the escrow holder, who should A. Turn the earnest money over to the Bureau of Real Estate, B. Return the earnest money to the seller, C. Retain the earnest money during a cooling-off period, D. File an interpleader action. Correct answer is D. File an interpleader action. An interpleader is a civil proceeding brought by a third person to have a court determine the ownership rights of rival claimants to the same money or property. Escrow holders do not resolve disputes between the parties. The matter of the earnest money should be submitted to a court for a decision.